Hey everybody, this is Colin Podcasting about real estate and welcome to show number 8. Today's guest is Mr. Ryan Chaw, a young 27-year-old investor who's built up a pretty impressive portfolio of rentals in California, one of the most difficult markets in the entire country to cash flow in. Definitely not the most landlord-friendly place to invest, so I'm very interested in hearing his story. Before we get on to that though, a few things I want to mention. I do have a website. It is colininvestments.com, and you can find a series of free reports that you can download. These are professionally designed reports written by me about all aspects of real estate investing, from what to do in the post-COVID economy to the 4 types of real estate investors and the 5 questions that you should be asking as a real estate investor. You can also find me on Facebook and Twitter with Colin Investment. You can find me on Instagram and YouTube and LinkedIn under Colin G. Murphy. So a lot of tools out there that I've developed to help people accelerate their real estate journeys, whether you're an investor, a wholesaler, or a flipper, or somebody just getting started. I'm trying to help people by developing tools that I've learned over the years. And 1,000 plus deals over the last 16 years, more than $100 million worth of real estate. So I'm trying to give a little bit of that back. And I'm always launching new tools every week. So keep an eye out on all those places. The website is probably the easiest, colininvestments.com, and you can sign up there. But on to Ryan Chaw. This is going to be a really good show. We're going to learn about, how he actually afforded all of those California homes that he's managing and renovated while working a full-time job as a pharmacist, where he got his original inspiration from, how he's managed to grow a very strong passive income stream, more than $10,000 a month. And he's really only getting started, but he's had a very quick start. We talked to him about how he does the leases, how he avoids renting to the wrong type of tenants, the pros and cons of self-managing, because that's what he does. We also drill into some of the very, very expensive mistakes, mistakes that cost him tens of thousands of dollars on his first deal. And he's very open about that and the lessons he's learned. We talk about the big influence in his life and the the advice he has for newbie investors who might be nervous about jumping in the real estate ladder, in general and in the current economy. So let's jump in and get Ryan Chaw onto the show. Hey Ryan, how you doing? Welcome to the show.
How's it going, Colin? I'm excited to be on the show, and thanks for inviting me.
No, it's my pleasure. I'm really excited to have you on. You're a different type of guest. You're someone younger who's had a fantastic few years, and that's a nice contrast to bringing on the kind of successful guys at 10 or 20 or 30 years experience. I think our viewers will find your story a little bit more relatable, and more doable, because you've done it in such a short period of time. But before we dig into all of that, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm 28. I'm actually a pediatric pharmacist during the day. I have pretty much a full-time job as a pharmacist during the day, and I invest in real estate during the evenings when I'm off. And so I kind of was inspired by my grandpa to get into real estate. He actually bought a few properties in the San Francisco Bay Area back in the 50s. So this was like when they were like dirt cheap, and so he just bought some up. And as we know, the rental income in the San Francisco Bay Area skyrocketed over time. And so the rent was able to pay for all of his expenses, allow him to retire early. And not only that, he was able to help help us pay part of my college tuition and that of my brothers as well. So I realized that real estate is truly one of the best ways to create generational wealth, not just for you, but for your children as well. And so I just wanted to get started as soon as possible. When I graduated in 2015, about a year after that, I saved up a lot of money for a down payment. I worked overtime and had some mutual funds I had saved up from my high school years. And I just bought my first property in 2016 for $262,000. And I rented it out per bedroom. And this was in my local college town. So I was able to maximize the profits I get on the property. I'm actually usually expected to get around $1,500 per property, but I'm actually getting more like $2,500 to $3,100.
All right, well, let's dig into that in a minute. But tell me about getting back to your grandfather. So was he a full-time investor, or was he like you, where he had a different job or a different business and he just did real estate with his savings and in the evenings?
Yeah, so he actually he had a full-time job as a civil engineer. And before that, he was also in the military. So he had some VA benefits as well. So that's how he got into it. Yeah. But I
Okay,
actually,
and it did.
I wasn't able to ask him how he did it because he already passed away by the time I started getting into real estate. And
Right.
after, he passed, my parents had sold the properties. So I actually was on my own when I got started.
Okay, so that kind of hit the real estate bug, kind of skipped a generation. It went from him to you.
Yeah, exactly. My parents, yeah, didn't do real estate. They rather do mutual funds. Yeah, they wanted to not have to manage tenants and all that. And that's what kind of scared them away from real estate. But I always believe that this is the best way to create that generational wealth,
Yeah.
right?
Well, I
If you're
guess
willing to
you
put in the
you
work.
you educated yourself on it, and I mean, before you bought your first property, did you go to any RIA meetings, or were you reading, Rich Dad Poor Dad, or listening to podcasts? What kind of stuff were you doing to
Yeah,
get in
so
the
I
right
actually
mindset
did.
to take those risks?
That's true. So one of the best books I read was Rich Dad Poor Dad for sure. Another great one out there
Mm-hmm.
was Millionaire Real Estate Investor by Gary Keller. And I
Mm-hmm.
did go to REI meetings as well to get some information whenever possible, listen to some podcasts. And I got started on my own. And honestly, even though I did all of that, I still wasn't totally prepared for my first investment because I actually did lose a lot of money on my first property.
Yeah, I mean, I think I mean, yeah, that happens. I lost money in my first property as well, but it's often, and my parents were zero interest in real estate at all, and my grandparents had zero interest in real estate, so I only really got the bug just from hanging around with other people and going to those meetings and working for companies that were involved in real estate, and just kind of hanging out with people that were a little
Yeah.
further up the line than me. But obviously you get to a stage where you get that enthusiasm and you get that initial information, and you get, obviously, a key thing is just being able to save money,
Yeah.
because there's so many people that earn money in their 20s and maybe go from a $40,000 salary to $100,000 salary, or maybe even more, but their lifestyle expands with it, so they still don't save anything. But the people that have that real estate mindset, or are aware of the long-term benefits of real estate, they quickly get into a habit of saving. The more they earn, the more they save. And
Right.
so you can get in a position where you can make that down payment at 23 years of age, whereas a lot of other 23-year-olds, they're driving good cars, they're eating in nice restaurants, they're going on nice vacations, or they're renting overpriced condos, or whatever else. That's the norm.
Yeah.
Whereas if you read certain books and listen to certain podcasts, or go to RIA meetings, or hang around with other people, you can put yourself on a completely different path. And like I say, you've built up a pretty good portfolio. You're not an investment banker earning millions of dollars. You're a pharmacist in a good job. But there's a lot of people with that kind of job that haven't got, that didn't have that down payment for that $260,000 house. So fair,
Yeah.
kudos to you for doing it. So,
Yeah. It's
talk
very
us then
important.
through that first deal. How did you find it? You mentioned that you saved up money for a down payment. Talk to us a little bit about that loan process, and how it went.
Yeah, so I actually bought it with that down payment I had saved up using conventional financing. I actually talked with a couple lenders to get the best price. You'd be surprised,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of lenders out there, they'll actually even be able to bid against each other to get you a lower price for the property. My first property was a 100-year-old property, and that was the first red flag
Wow.
for the house. It actually
Yeah.
had a lot of problems with it that I kind of ignored and I wasn't too aware of. There were like these crawl spaces and holes around the outside of the house that pests could get into. And so I actually ended
Mm-hmm.
up with both rat problems and flea problems throughout the time I owned the house. Another thing was I had to completely remodel the bathroom because the way it was set up, you had to step up steps to get into the bathtub. And so that was a safety issue for like college students. So that cost me like $6,000 for the remodel. And then I get
Yeah.
this call in the middle of the night after, I moved in tenants and everything saying, hey, dude, there's a sewage that backed up and it's coming out of the kitchen sink. And it's all over the kitchen floor and it smells like crap,
Oh.
probably because it
Yep.
was, right?
Yep. Yep.
So I was like frantically calling up people at like, midnight on a weekend and I finally found someone actually, and he was able to sanitize the area. And I also had to call up a plumber to stick a camera down the pipe to see what was wrong with the sewage. I found out that,
Mm-hmm.
because of the cast iron pipes rusting over, roots sticking into it, I had to basically replace the whole line because it was broken. and so that
Yeah,
cost me
that's
six
expensive.
thousand dollars to replace. And all of this could have been prevented if I did a sewage line
Yes.
inspection during the escrow phase of the house, because I could have used it as a negotiation point during the escrow phase to get some concessions for replacing the sewage line.
So
So
what kind of inspection did you get at the time?
I
I
just
mean,
got a
obviously you didn't
normal
get a
home
sewage line.
inspection. Yeah, so the
Like
sewage
a
line
full one,
inspection.
or a 4 point?
Sorry.
So was it a full inspection, or a 4 point inspection? So you did go, they did go into detail about testing all the faucets, all the windows,
They
telling you
did,
about
yeah. So it
the old
was a
plumbing
full
systems.
inspection, but it didn't include the sewage line inspection. So I
Yeah.
had to order, I should have ordered that separately. And now I do that for any houses that are before the 1980s, because that's around the
Yep.
time they started switching over to PVC piping. But yeah, so I had that. I also couldn't fill all the rooms. I had a vacancy. So I was losing $600 per month for 8 months, which added up to like $5,000. And then I realized
Yep.
that the house didn't have a good AC system. And so during the summers, it would get to 100 plus degrees outside, and then the house would be in the like 80s or 90s, right? So I had to put in an AC system that cost me $18,000. I chose a ductless AC system because it was energy efficient. And so overall, I lost $30,000 on the house, over 30,000, but I was able to make up for it in appreciation. The property went from 260,000 to 320,000. So
Mm-hmm.
luckily,
Yeah.
you know,
26. Yeah, well, that
yeah,
was luck.
yeah, it was
The
very
market
lucky.
bailed
Yeah,
you
definitely.
out.
It was icing on the
Um,
cake. But I was that's kind of the thing about real estate. You
But
go,
but again, if you didn't have the reserves, the money to pay for those $30,000 of repair, you would have been forced to fire sell a home in need of repairs, and you
yes,
wouldn't have got the
exactly.
appreciation. So
Yeah,
you only can take advantage of that appreciation if you have those maintenance reserves. And if
yes,
you're buying a
exactly.
100-year-old property, they need to be pretty substantial, because a lot more stuff can go wrong with a 100-year-old property than a 30-year-old property.
Yeah.
A lot more. And you really did jump in at the deep end, and obviously you know that now. But just for our listeners that are thinking about doing that first deal, if you're going to buy a house that needs to be renovated, maybe don't do a 100-year-old house for your first renovation. I mean, I
Yes,
wouldn't advise that to
definitely.
anybody.
That's part of my
It's
criteria now.
they're
Definitely.
they're complicated. There's a lot of stuff that can go wrong. I mean,
There is.
and
Yep.
it could have been worse. You could have. I mean, it's obviously the piping, the
Plumbing,
wiring, the pest
electricity,
control, the
exactly.
floor
All of it.
structures, the just the even the wall structures. I mean, there's a
Yeah.
lot of stuff that can go wrong in 100, that would need to be maintained in a 100-year-old house, that is not even an issue with a 30-year-old block house, but is with a 100-year-old brick house, and
Hmm.
God forbid it's a 100-year-old frame house. There's even more stuff that can happen to it. But
Yeah. Yeah. No,
you
it's
know
true.
that, but I'm just saying it so that our listeners know that. So how did you find that deal? Was that on the MLS? Did you find it off market? How did you get it?
Yeah, so I talked to a couple of real estate agents. One of the key questions I asked was, "Are you a real estate investor yourself, or do you
Mm-hmm.
work with other real estate investors?" Because those are the type of real estate agents who actually can help you analyze the deal, see if it makes sense, right? But at the time, I was just beginning, so obviously, I just kind of chose a real estate investor, and it was on the MLS, and it
Mm-hmm.
was actually very close to the college campus. So even though it was like 100 years old, I was like, well, it's so close to the campus that this is always going to be in high demand, and I should always be able to get
And it was
this thing
vacant
rented.
when you bought it,
It was
or was
vacant
there
when I bought
people?
it. Yeah,
Okay, so you bought it vacant, and you had to get it rent ready, which you did,
rent
and then
ready.
also you
Yeah.
had to do very expensive additional kind of repairs after you had it rented out. So let's let me dig into the rentals in a minute. But before we dig into the rentals, I mean, let me see. So you got one property. Now, let's dig into the rentals now. So your first deal, you got it fixed up the kind of quick way, how did you put tenants in there? What kind of tenants were they?
Yeah, so they were all college students. I actually created a fourth extra bedroom in that house. I usually buy 3 bed, 2 baths, and then create either a fourth or maybe even a fifth bedroom. I rented it out
Mm-hmm.
for 600, about 620 a room. So 4 bedrooms,
Okay.
that's around 2,500 or so. I used
Yep.
Facebook groups, believe it or not, to advertise the rentals. So there's a lot of groups like off-campus housing groups. There's a class of 2022, right? So I target for more like third or fourth year students who are more mature students. And
Right.
so I just basically repeated this process year after year. I was actually able to take out the $60,000 in appreciation and use that as a down payment for my fourth property using a HELOC. So by buying that first house, I basically bought my fourth house as well at the same time. Um, and then
I
so I
see.
bought
Okay.
a property per year. And after 4 years of investing, and I'm 28 right now. I just turned 28, and I have four single family homes with 18 tenants. That makes me $10,755 per month in rental income. And I wouldn't be where I am today if after that first property, I just, was like, this is it, I'm done, and I quit, right? So
Yep.
I think that's just kind of a testament to you just have to keep going at it. And if you have a proven model that works, you just repeat that same process and scale it to where you
So
want.
did you save then the 20% deposits for the first three houses out of your own earnings, your own savings, what you'd set aside?
Yeah, so I reinvested the profits I made from the first rental, and I worked overtime at my W-2 job to
Mm-hmm.
make those down payments. And of course, for the fourth house, as I said, I took that basically out of the first house, that equity, and put it onto the fourth house. I actually took out $100,000 HELOC, and I put like, I think 70,000 or so onto the fourth house as a down payment.
That's fantastic. But obviously, what I'm trying to say is you saved a lot of money. I imagine you lived a
Yes.
pretty thrifty lifestyle in
Yes.
order to be able to save the 40, 50, $60,000 for each of those first three houses.
Oh
You know,
yeah, I think that's
you're
key. Definitely. I saved over 50% of my take-home pay. Definitely. Every 2 weeks I would save over 50% of what I
hmm
made. And I think that's kind of key. Like I saw a lot of my friends kind of blow their money on, clubbing and, getting girls and all of that. But for me, I didn't want that life, right? I wanted financial
yeah.
freedom. I wanted to live life on my own terms, basically be able
hmm
to do what I want, when I want, where I want, with whomever I want to do it with. And because I kept that goal in mind, that forced me to save that greater than 50% of my take-home paycheck every month.
That's great. No, fair play to you. That's a fantastic lesson for people out there. And the lesson is you don't need to live like that forever. But if you have a goal for 4 or 5 years during your 20s, which is a very good time to save, by the way, because it's a lot harder to save when you have kids, like I do. But it's a lot easier when you're younger and you don't mind living in a small apartment that's 4 miles or 5 miles further out than the cool areas. I mean, just you can do it. And if you have a goal that you're doing it for, it's actually not that hard. You can enjoy it, especially if you're sharing your story with others and other people are buying into it, or if you know other people that are doing the same thing. It's you can do it together.
Definitely.
So that helps a lot. But I'm interested in the property management because most people they buy a house, they'll contact a property manager. They'll say you go and do the background checks and you're more likely to place a good tenant than I am. I know a lot of people that place their own tenants and it was a disaster. They just ended
Yeah.
up putting bad people in and had to, after maybe a year and a half of late payments and broken
Wow.
promises and broken everything, they got them evicted. So how did you mentioned that you targeted students as opposed to, non-students. You're targeting specific students. You're targeting third and fourth year students who are a little less party crazy
Mhm.
than first and second years who are having maybe their first couple of years of freedom as adults,
Yeah.
even though they're not adults, but they technically are, but they don't always act like adults, and they're not always good tenants, that's for sure. So you target older people, that's nice. You targeted Facebook, so they're coming directly to you, so you're not paying, expensive placement fees, which can be,
Hmm.
up to 80% or even 100% of the first month's rent. So
Oh
that's
yeah.
thousands and
Yeah,
thousands
I
of
don't have to
dollars
hire
that
out.
you're.
Right.
So did you do when somebody applied to you through Facebook, this nice sounding student, did you do a background check on them, a credit score check? Did you get their parents involved in co-signing leases? How did you kind of protect yourself?
Very good question. Yeah, I think the key here is that the real Achilles heel of any real estate investment is the tenant. So if you don't have a tenant, or you have a poor tenant that you might have to end up evicting, or a tenant who's just not paying rent, right, then your whole investment goes down. I look for specifically third or fourth year students, but also like professional tenants such as pharmacy students, dental
Mm-hmm.
students, any like physical therapy students or medical students. And these are students who really have to focus on their studies, and they have to pass their midterms and finals. So they're not going to be willing to deal with someone who wants to throw a house party and go crazy, right?
Right,
So
because they have to study, unlike,
exactly. Yeah, they're like, I got to
business
study, I got to
studies
pass these
student or
classes.
someone.
And actually, my
Mm-hmm.
pharmacy school, I would say around 6 to 8 students per year kind of failed their classes and have to do another year. So it's actually very tough to pass the pharmacy school. And so they take it
Wow.
very seriously. There's this culture that you have to work really hard to pass your classes, right? And so those are the type of students I target. I do also get last 2 month bank statements from the parents and the FICO score to make sure that they can afford the rent. And I have the parents co-sign the lease when I can.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you get any blowback from that this kind of guy is asking for 2 months bank statements for their daughter's rental? Do you get anybody saying that's none
I
of your business,
so
kid? You
I
know?
I usually don't actually, all the way up until
Okay.
this last year. But during this last year, I think because people are more unemployed now, I mean,
Yeah.
more people have lost their jobs, right? There has
Mm-hmm.
been blowback on that. But seriously, it only happened this last year. I, I instead of asking for the bank statements, if they do give that pushback, I asked instead for like the student loan documents to see that they're taking out student loans to cover their room and board, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe like what do you call it, financial aid or any other proof of income to show that they can afford the rent. As long as they have proof of income, I'm okay. It doesn't have to necessarily be bank statements.
Yeah, and you said you're collecting, was it first and last month and a deposit? How much, what are you collecting up front again? If the rent is $2,000, or say the rent's $500 a month, how much are you collecting up front?
For the security deposit, I collect 1.5 times rent. So if it was
Okay.
$500 per month, then it'll be $750 as an upfront fee, plus first month's rent before I hand them the keys or before they move in. I'm not
Gotcha.
actually handing them the keys. Usually, I leave the keys in the drawer, and then they can pick it up, because most of this is hands off. I actually haven't visited my rentals for over, I would say, 8 months or so now, or no, even longer than that, almost a year now.
Wow.
So yeah,
And
it's
if
all kind of hands off.
And are the students kind of tangled up with each other's payments? Because if you have four separate people paying you $600 a month, if one of them fails to pay it, are the other three liable at all? Or are they expected to cough up the difference? Do you have anything like that?
No, I don't actually, because I have separate leases, and I'm able to do
Okay.
separate leases because I check with the city planning division, and they said basically if you have a business license with us, you can do separate leases, you can collect separate rent and all that. So I use a payment app called Zelle, and they all do direct deposits through Zelle, and it tells me right away when they pay it, so I can tell when they're late. I don't have to deal with the, oh, I lost my check in the mail type of deal, right? Um,
Yep.
and the other thing is, it's great because they're tech savvy. A lot of these college students,
Sure.
so it's
Mm-hmm.
very convenient for them. It's a phone app; they can just log on and send the rent. So I never get late rent, or I never get unpaid rent, I should say.
And what do you do for all the maintenance? Are you the person they ring when there's a leaky faucet or a broken AC or a bathroom door that doesn't lock? Are they ringing you on a Saturday night saying, come and fix this, and then you have to go and find someone else to
Yeah,
fix
so
it?
the
How does
good
that
thing
work?
is I have a contractor team, and this team I kind of developed throughout the years. They basically, the tenant could either text them directly to fix something that's an emergency, and they have the code to let themselves into the house, do their work, and then get out and then send me the bill, and I'll send them the check. So that is all automated. I could do it that way. Or sometimes, if they do text me something is wrong, I could just forward a text message to the contractor. They know what to do. A couple kind of systems I use for contract work. I usually ask them to give me like an itemized bid before they do any major projects, to kind of separate out the
Sure.
cost of materials and then the cost of labor. So I know, like, if I'm paying $200 an hour for labor, okay, maybe something's wrong here, right? So that's how I make sure the
Mm-hmm.
contractors don't overcharge me. I also make sure I pay them at the end because I have this relationship with them, right? I pay them at the end to make sure that
Hmm.
they're incentivized to do the work that needs to be done. And this is usually, when I'm doing a major project, like major renovations, anything less than $500, I usually trust that they can do the work and, get it done in a timely manner and everything.
Okay, so it sounds like you've tried to automate a lot of it.
Hmm.
I manage some of my own rentals, others I don't, but the ones I do manage, I use a service called Homey, HOMEE,
Hmm.
which is a way of outsourcing repairs and maintenance. They are in most states. They're in about 40 different states, and California is one of them. And
Yeah.
basically, you download an app, you have your app, the tenants download the same app, and whenever they have an issue, typical handyman, plumber, electrician, AC, they log it into the app. You get an alert saying so and so has requested a repair to the AC. Do you approve us
Hmm.
sending someone to go and look at it? And they go out, they bill you by the minute, and only when they're there. They don't bill you for when they have to go to Home Depot to pick up the parts, which some people do.
Oh,
They
yeah.
go and fix it, and then they just go and do it, and you just pay from the app. So it's very very handy way of managing repairs
Yeah, wow.
for
I'm gonna have
self
to definitely
managers.
check that one out. It sounds like it really
I
helps with
I
automating
think you
everything.
should, because you just just get an alert saying, do you approve us going out to check out the leak in the bathroom at 123 Main Street? You go yes,
Hmm.
and somebody will literally go out. You generally within 30 minutes. They're very very quick. They'll
Wow.
go out, they'll fix it, they'll take pictures, send you an invoice, and you pay with the app. It's very easy, and it's obviously good for the tenants as well,
Oh,
because
yeah.
they get alerts that they're on the way and they're 10 blocks away and blah blah blah. So it's, yeah, check it out. It
Oh,
could
that's
work
very
well
cool.
for your situation.
Definitely.
Um, where else? What else do we need to talk about? So, okay, so I like the way you do the leases. I like the way you screen and how you avoid renting to the party students. And yeah, I mean, any cons to self-managing? Have you ever regretted doing it, or have you ever been tempted to hire a manager, or you've gotten better at tweaking your systems and your software that you're going to continue doing it that way?
I've gotten better at empowering the tenants. So, I assign tenants responsibilities around the house, certain things that they're in charge of. Like maybe if the internet goes down, I'll have the internet under or I'll put one of their names under the internet, Comcast, and then they'll call Comcast and be able to fix the problem rather than me having to be the middleman, because I used to
Hmm.
have to be the middleman for that. If there's tenant versus
Sure.
tenant issues, I first, the tenant who's complaining to me, I talk to them and say, okay, here's what I want you to do first. Talk face to face with the other guy, right? And then come up with a plan, an actionable plan that you guys can agree on, and then take action on that plan and to resolve the issue. And of course, state why you feel the way you do, and then from there, if there's still issues with that, then you can come back to me. And after that, usually everything's resolved. I don't have any issues afterwards. If I do, potentially I could talk to the other tenant. And I've done that before one time. And I've actually had to go all the way to the last step, which is talking to the parent if the child is really doing something bad, like something illegal, right? So I
Sure.
do have steps, a step-by-step process for how that works. But generally speaking, after I just kind of empower them to take charge of the situation and work it out, everything
Hmm.
everything is fine, great after that.
I love that you're developing these systems and these steps. And if you had those, if you put all that together into some kind of, manual,
Hmm.
that's the kind of thing you could hand off to a right hand person. If this portfolio gets so big that you don't need to be on it full time, you could almost pay someone part time to do it, and to do it using the manual that you designed. If you got to 8 or 10 or 20 or 30 rentals, that's the kind of thing you'd have to do. And having the systems in place and having them documented and explained in bullet
Hmm.
points is key to doing that.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
talk.
Having the systems in place is really key to self-managing your rentals at first, and eventually, if you want to hire out a property manager, you should also talk to the property manager and show him how you've been doing it, how what your system is
Yeah,
like, so that he can understand how best to do it. Because you want to help the property manager as well manage your properties better too.
you do, and we could talk all day about property managers, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But I
Yeah.
like the way you're doing it. But talk to me about California, because I've sold, I I mean, probably $30 million of real estate in Florida to people in California that don't want to invest in California. They want to invest somewhere where they can
Yeah,
get more value for money, better cash flow. And I understand you've found a niche that enables you to make California profitable, because for obviously for so many people it's not, but it's still an expensive market. It's still more pro tenant than pro
exactly.
landlord. You still have higher taxes on the income earned in California. I mean, are you going to continue investing in California, building up that portfolio? Have you ever been tempted to, to sell one of those houses and use the proceeds to buy a few more in Texas or Florida or, Ohio or somewhere like that?
Yeah, this is such a common question. I feel like, what happens if you're in an expensive market? If you live in an expensive market and you can't even afford the houses in your city, how do you even get started, right? Well, there's a couple things. You could, of course, house hack, which means you put like 3.5% down and on the house. You live in one of the rooms and you rent out the others, and that's totally fine.
Mm-hmm.
But what I do is I don't look at properties that are like super expensive, like $1 million property, because that's just not going to cash flow. I always want to make sure the
Yeah.
numbers work first. You got to make sure you have positive cash flow, not negative cash flow, because if a recession occurs, having that negative cash flow and maybe you have a vacancy, now you could be underwater, which is not
Mm-hmm.
good. So having that positive cash flow is very key. What I do is I look around a 1.5 hour drive radius from where I live,
Okay.
and
Which
that's
which is
where.
where, by the way, give us. I don't think I've asked you that.
Oh,
Where do you live
Sacramento. I,
exactly?
I live in
Okay.
Sacramento right now. So yeah, houses in this area are like $500,000. If I were to drive like an hour away in Stockton, there's this college in Stockton, that I invest in, right? And that's an hour away, and the houses there are like 300,000 or maybe even less than that
So
sometimes.
that's where your rentals are. They're in Stockton, which is about
Exactly.
an hour and a half from Sacramento. And
Yes.
there's a college, kind of a college town where you have serious, pharmacy and medical students there.
Exactly. And there's other ones too. There's one in Elk Grove, called California North State. They have
Mm-hmm.
pharmacy students, medical students, nursing students. So I probably will be investing in that area very soon as well. And these properties, in these areas, they're a lot lower price, so you can make the cash flow work a lot better for you. And if you put in that fifth bedroom, you could be making that 1% rule, or maybe even 2% rule in your area. What I do is great for California. It works very well. I'm able to make that 1% rule. But if you were to do this in other states, you would be making a whole lot more, because
Yeah.
properties in other states, 100 or 200,000, and you're still making $500 per room in rent, because that's usually what students pay for rent as at a minimum. You'll be making a lot more cash flow. So yeah, this
So
is
are you tempted to do that for your next two or three houses? Are you tempted
that's
to
a
buy
great
in areas where
question.
you can get the 2% rule instead of the 1% rule,
I
which is
kind of
still
like for
fantastic to get the 1% rule?
Yeah, that's a great question. To be honest, I do like the icing on the cake, the appreciation that's in California, and I like that
Mm-hmm.
ability to take out the equity on the property and just reinvest it when it does go up. So right
Mm-hmm.
now, I'm sticking to California. Believe it or not, I know a lot of people are fleeing California, but for me, the model makes sense, right? And so I repeat something that is a proven model and has done very well for me throughout the years. Obviously, since I'm making a six-figure income from this and I'm only 28 years old, I'm just,
Yeah.
it makes sense for me to just repeat what I'm doing, because what I'm doing is working.
So let's drill into that a bit, because it is a fantastic income. You mentioned $10,755 a month. So,
Hmm.
like 100 and whatever, 25, $30,000 a year, which is, pretty good salary in its own right. But what are your, that's obviously the gross amount. You've got mortgages in all these properties.
Hmm.
What are your net figures looking like? What kind of schedules do you have your mortgage on? I mean, you're obviously young enough to take
Hmm.
30 years to pay these off and still enjoy the much higher income after 30 years. But are you keeping that extra money for yourself? Are you plowing it back into the mortgages to pay them down quicker? What's your plan for the future cash flow of these post mortgage?
So my current plan is to pay them down relatively quickly. I'm going to use the snowball effect. The first properties pretty much paid for, and re-roll that cash flow that I make on that first property into the next one, into the next one, into the next one.
So your first one's already paid for, even though you only bought
Yeah,
it in 2016. You've paid off the mortgage in 4 years.
yeah, pretty much.
Wow,
Yeah, I
wow,
just
it's
I
amazing.
like I said, I reinvested the cash flow. I worked that W-2 job and just reinvested and put it into that property. So, yeah, I mean, right now I'm kind of at this place where should I leverage my money more or should I pay them all off? If I pay them all off, I could do that in about 4 or 5 years for the next three properties. So I
And is
could
that using just the income from the property, or is that topping it up with
with the
mortgage
W
payments from
2 income as
your
well.
W
Yeah,
two?
yeah, exactly.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
That's
So,
fantastic. You won't pay it
I'm kind
off,
of at
and
that stage where if I pay it off, I could retire at 31 with the six-figure income coming in, or 31 or 32 around that time, and have that six-figure income coming in, or I could, keep investing and maybe make multiple six figures, maybe even seven figures on my real estate portfolio.
so is that still up in the air, or do you have kind of specific goals for the next 2, 3 years in terms of what assets you want to get or what you want to do with your existing assets?
Well, I kind of feel like it's, have you ever heard of Bruce Lee's phrase, be like water, which basically means be malleable, be flexible. So if some
Mm-hmm.
good, great deal comes up, I'm not going to sit on the sidelines and just stick with what I'm trying to do, pay off those properties. I'm going to be leveraging my money because if, prices drop like, 20, 30%, then it makes sense, right? Like I would be
Right.
making a whole lot more if I just were to leverage my money that way. So I think that's kind of key is you do have a goal, but then you also have to be very flexible with what happens in the world, right? Especially with COVID coming in, there's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
opportunity out there in the near future. A lot of people, potentially we could have foreclosures, right? And so maybe
Yep.
the housing. I mean, I'm not saying it's not certain. Obviously, for real estate, it's better to buy and then wait, not wait and then buy. So that's kind of a key phrase that I learned. You buy and then you wait and you make that money on the rent, the appreciation, all of that. And
Mm-hmm.
rather than wait and try to time the market because the market might not go down. It could be potentially, continuing to go up. But I do see a lot of opportunity whenever there's a recession, right? So
Yeah.
I keep that in
I
mind.
think that's a good attitude to have, that to have goals, to have something to aim towards, to have a destination, but also to get yourself in a position where you're able to take advantage of opportunities. And you're only in that position if you have the cash, if you have the reserves, if you have the deposits, if you have money set aside for capex, so that replacing a roof doesn't mean you can't buy a deal somewhere else. So
Mm-hmm.
if you have that financial discipline, I guess you can kind of take advantage of opportunities. And I think there will be a lot of opportunities,
Mm-hmm.
certainly next year, that are not available right now. I mean, right now, certainly in my market in Tampa, inventory is so tight. There's so
Yeah.
few properties available. It's just a joke.
Yeah.
It's gotten so,
It's
it
a
was
hot
always
market in
tight. The last
California
three
too.
years it was a hot market, but now
Yeah.
with so many avenues to purchase closed, there's so many sellers that are nervous about selling.
Yeah.
Auctions aren't basically functioning at the minute, so the inventory
Inventory
is
is
like a
low.
month's
Yeah.
inventory. It should
Definitely.
be closer to 6 months, but it's more like a month. So and I can't imagine major parts of California being all that different. So
Right.
let's wait and see. But like you say, you don't want to sit on your hands. You always want to be taking action. I think people, what's another way to put it? You said it a nice way. Another way of saying it is it's far more likely that
Oh,
you regret not taking action than regret
yeah.
taking action. You know,
Exactly. Exactly. Couldn't have
and I
said
think
it better.
that's
Yep.
yeah. I think if you ask a lot of older, wiser investors than you and I, they'll find far more examples of regretting not taking action than action that they did
Mm-hmm.
took and regretted afterwards.
Yeah,
So
exactly. And right now, you could take advantage of the interest rates. Interest rates are like record low right now.
yep.
I
Mm-hmm.
refinanced my fourth property actually about 2 months ago because I was able to get the rate from 4.875% down to 3.25%. So it's,
Wow, big
yeah, it's
difference.
huge, huge difference there. So yeah, take advantage of the current rates. They're really low right now because of, the Fed is pumping out so much money. So yeah.
You should. Anything you're holding for the long term, it makes sense to do that. It absolutely, and also if you're saying, well, I'll buy it at 150,000 now and a 3% interest rate, that might actually be a better deal for you than buying it at 140,000 at a 4.5% interest rate in a year's time.
Yeah.
So if your aim is long term buy and hold, lock in a very low interest rate. The main thing is don't buy something that doesn't cash flow. If it's a rental, it has to cash flow. And I don't mean cash flowing $30 a month. That's too tight.
Yeah.
It has to cash flow
Right.
properly. It has to, and if you can get it cash flowing on a 15 or a 20-year amortization, that's far safer as well. If it just barely cash flows on a 30-year note, it's still a little bit tight. You need some pretty steady reserves for that. But if you can find a property that cash flows on a 15-year, 20-year term, like the ones you're buying, and the 1% rules typically would, if you can find that where the monthly rent is 1% of the sales price, you'll be okay. Just avoid the people that made the biggest mistakes in the last recession were the ones that got stuck with a lot of properties that weren't cash flowing. The people that got stuck with properties that were cash flowing were generally able to hold on to them until the market turned and shot back up again. So bear that in mind. And we got to wrap up soon, Ryan. But what advice do you have for newbie investors out there? What advice do you have for other young people that might have an attitude of, I've been saving, I have money, and I want to do something with it, but I don't know what's your advice?
I would say there's a couple of things. Kind of get educated first off, right? Listen to these podcasts, listen to Colin's podcast, right? It's a great one. Read books. Bigger Pockets has some great resources out there. You can go to REI meetings. That's real estate investment meetings. Every city has a local REI meeting. Also, I recommend finding a mentor. I actually do kind of specialize teaching my student housing market for people who are interested in getting into student housing, because I believe it's actually one of the most lucrative markets out there. And so you could get in touch with me, or just find someone that does what you want to do. If you want to flip, find someone who's really great at flipping. That would be my advice.
I think that's good advice. Yeah, seek out like-minded people. You are the average of the people you hang out with. There's a certain level of education you need before diving in, but you need to get to the stage where you can dive in. And if you can do it with somebody who will kind of guide you a little bit through your first couple of deals, that's invaluable, and that's worth giving them half your profits from that deal or whatever it might be, because they can save you from so much trouble. But look, I must congratulate you on what you've achieved so far. I love your attitude. I like you have the right balance of discipline and caution, but you're an action taker. You don't mind diving in. You don't mind taking on all these assets, all this debt, managing 18 different tenants. That's a lot of responsibility, and I admire you for having achieved that, and I think you're going to go on to do even bigger and better things. So how can people contact you that want to reach out to you, maybe learn a little bit more about your journey? What's the best way?
Thank you, Colin. So for those interested in the student housing market, I do provide resources for those just trying to get started out. Even if you're not interested in just the student housing market, these are great resources. So you can contact me at www.newbierealestateinvesting.com. That's www.newbierealestateinvesting.com. And newbie is spelled NEWBIE. And if you sign up for that newsletter that I send out, I provide weekly emails that kind of help people who are just trying to get started into real estate really learn what's out there. And so you guys can contact me there. And thanks again for having me on the show, Colin. I really appreciate it. This was hopefully an awesome episode for our audience here.
I enjoyed it. I think people are going to enjoy it. I'll make sure I put your website on the show notes. And let's stay in touch, Ryan. I look forward to seeing where your journey leads you.
All right. Thanks, Colin. See you guys.
All right. You take care. Bye. So there you go, folks. That was show 8 with Ryan Chaw in Sacramento, California. Hasn't he got a great story? And he's done all that when he was 20 years old. I have no hesitation in admitting I was nowhere near as organized or focused or smart as he was when I was 28 years old. I was nowhere near that. I was still figuring things out, still figuring out how to, that I should be saving more money, that I should be listening a bit more to people further ahead of me in the ladder, that I should be doing more investing. I did very little investing in my 20s, practically none. It's all in my 30s and onwards. So I really like that story. I like how disciplined he was. There's a lot of lessons to learn there about how he is the opposite of the instant gratification we associate a lot of that millennial generation with. He is clearly not of that ilk at all. He has something to teach people that are a couple of decades older than him about the benefits of just living below your means, living far below your means, but for a purpose, for a goal. He's not doing it to scrape by. He's got a good job. He's got a good education. And, I like his story, how his grandfather put a lot of his grandchildren through college through his real estate that he bought in the 50s in the Bay Area. Can you imagine how much that real estate would be worth now? Oh my God. And, but like I say, Ryan has got 4 properties with 18 different tenants, paying him about $125,000, $130,000 a year gross. He's already paid off the first mortgage. He's on his way to paying off the other 3 mortgages in the next 5 years when he'll still be in his early 30s. And he's just got some great options ahead of him. Whatever this pandemic brings, it's that kind of mindset of having a plan, living below your means, having very strong reserves, learning from your mistakes. He's building a business with the property management systems and processes, with the contractor systems and processes. I think he's a good learner and will go on to bigger and better things. And he's already kind of giving back and teaching other young people in particular, I imagine, about his own strategies for being a student landlord on his website. So good luck to him. And thanks for listening. I hope you're enjoying the guests we've had. I think we've had some great guests in the last 3 or 4 episodes. And you'll learn a lot more about me and what I do and the tools I provide on my website, colininvestments.com, where we have a lot of different reports that you can read and download to help you on your own real estate journeys, help you accelerate them. You'll find all the podcasts there. You'll find the videos, not only of these podcasts, but other videos I've done as well, kind of webinars and tutorials, and I have some animated videos up there too. So check them out. There's a lot of resources there. You will find me on all the usual social media places. I'm not the most social media friendly guy traditionally, but I'm trying. But I've got a burgeoning Facebook page that you can find on Colin Investments. We've got some dialogue going on there. You'll find me on Twitter, Colin Investment, Instagram, Colin G. Murphy. I have a YouTube channel which you can find with Colin G. Murphy. You'll find me, I'm pretty active on Bigger Pockets and LinkedIn as well. So there's loads of ways to connect with me. I do provide links where you can schedule 20-minute conversations with me. I try to set aside a few hours a week just to give back, some time to talk to people about their problems and give any feedback I can on your deals and your strategies. So feel free to reach out. I'm happy to chat to people about real estate and investing. And just in general, you guys look after yourselves, stay safe, stay focused, and always be connecting with like-minded investors. That is what it's all about. This is Colin podcasting about real estate. I'm signing out, guys. You take care, and I look forward to catching up again with show number 9.